Did you know that we're in the middle of an industrial revolution? Well, you should, because it is and will affect every area of our lives. OK, now cast your mind back to your minds back to the school history lesson. The first industrial revolution was the steam and water power in the 1700s. Remember that panel?
Yes.
Yeah,
It started in Cromford.
Oh, here we go,
which
right.
is not far from where I was born.
Brilliant. OK, we're on that. All right, the second one was thanks to electricity and the light bulb, of course. The third was the digital revolution. This began in the 1970s with those early computers in our houses and big noisy factories. And now we are in the middle of what Matt Hancock described when he was digital minister in 2017 as the greatest challenge we face as a nation and as a world, which kind of begs the question why we're not discussing it more. Simplistically, it can be characterised as the greater integration of technology into our lives, which will cause societal transformation at a global scale. A cashless society, which in the words of the World Economic Forum leader Klaus Schwab, will blur the boundary between the digital and physical worlds. Basically, we won't be able to leave the house without one of these, and both big business and government will have greater access to your every move. Now, panel, in that same speech, Matt Hancock said, if you don't much like change, I'm afraid I don't have so much good news for you. So fast forward 5 years, panel, do you feel the greater encroachment of tech into our lives is a force for good or bad? Ben?
Well, I'm against it, but I think the tide is irreversible. It's happening. We need to embrace it. We need to somehow learn to live with it and neuter some of its more sinister aspects. I mean, I think cryptocurrencies, especially central bank-created cryptocurrencies, is a recipe for the ultimate in the nanny state, in this wet nurse, because they will then be able to monitor precisely what you're spending your money on. They'll be able to tax you at the point of expenditure, varying tax rates, depending on what it is you wish to purchase. They'll know where you are, when you're there. You know, this is all happening. And we see it all around us already with cameras all over London. I mean, I can't imagine you can go down any street in London without being on a camera at some point. And, you know, it's
Downing Street, I think.
Well, what were the two policemen outside Downing Street doing?
They're having a drink. They was having a drink and a
But you see, Ben,
agadoo.
and of course, all of the things you've just identified have been enabled and facilitated with the pandemic. OK, so even Klaus Schwab, his book, The Great Global Reset, COVID-19, he talks about the fact that the pandemic has presented an opportunity
To build back better.
to build back better.
And how's that working out?
Yeah.
Well,
We've
we
got a
don't know.
breakdown in supply chains, we've got inflation, we've got a cost of living crisis. So where are we building back better?
Frightened people.
The lockdowns, and I hope I'll get support, at least from Lisa as an anarchist, the lockdowns were the most draconian
Yes, you've got
experiment in
full of it there.
social and economic engineering.
Agree more.
Extreme measures taken in an economy is a finely balanced ecosystem. And they went in and threw a massive boulder into this still lake.
Now, in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, some would say that is necessary to effectively turn off our financial system, reset the computer, and we have to, in the words, build back better.
So what's changed then? So just let me think about this. What has changed in this new revolution? Because I know every time there is a industrial revolution, I know what happens. The rich get even richer, and the people at the bottom get even poorer and are therefore even more easily exploited.
And in the pandemic, we've seen the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of humanity.
Yeah. And, you know, if you know anybody who works in Amazon, in any of the Amazon warehouses, they will tell you how this works out, because this works out with cameras following them around, with digital machines that are strapped to their body, which tells you how fast they walk.
Disempowered people, right?
Absolutely.
Disempowered individuals. Well,
but this is not happening. But this is not happening to the middle class, and it's not happening anywhere above, because the middle class are now the work that we used to do. I say we as a working class woman, the work that we used to do, which was we used to make things. We were made things and we were useful to society and we knew exactly why we were here. Do you know who does that work now? The artisanal hipster. in Shoreditch, baking their little cakes.
Well, on that, actually...
But they're artisans.
Well, let me bring in, just before I come to you, Joe, one second. While Lisa's mentioned work, let me show you what Matt Hancock said in this speech in 2017.
Was he still married, then?
Was he still married? Yes, he was still married. Oh, Joe, that's very controversial. He's still married now, isn't he? Otherwise, it was a quick divorce. Right, this is what he said in 2017. The fourth industrial revolution will change the kind of jobs needed in industry. Our strong view is that as a nation, we must create the jobs of the future. Digital revolution brings with it disruption. And as the RSA so powerfully set out last month, the risk is not that we adopt new technologies that destroy jobs. The risk to jobs comes from not adopting new technologies. Our task is to support redeployment, not unemployment. Joe?
Well, that worked really well because there's been a lot of support from the government, hasn't there? I mean, I have to say that, broadly speaking, I agree with Lisa in the broadest terms. However, I have to say that doing simple things like taxing your car online is a damn sight easier because you can do it at 10 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning than having to go and queue at the post office. Getting a passport online, all of those things have made life a lot easier. But, and that doesn't mean that you've got to have access to broadband and internet and all of those things which not everybody has. Banking online,
It's also, I worry about the older generation with more tech.
Yes, but there is a point where, there's always going to be an older generation, and it goes back to that, whether it's an anecdotal quote or whatever, can they not bring in decimalisation
When
until
all
I'm
the old
dead?
people, yeah.
The problem is that it is used as, quite often, a smokescreen, if you like, for people not to engage at a human level. However, I had the misfortune of having to take my very elderly dad into hospital on Friday, A&E, and the treatment was absolutely wonderful, and we didn't wait more than, 20 minutes before somebody was coming to do something, and it was all on handheld computers. It wasn't, That efficiency is great. Sadly, it doesn't transfer to... if you then try and link up with something else. There's an awful lot of stuff that technology has made faster, better and easier. And there are people who need to design those programmes. And if you think about things like 3D technology, which have made fantastic advances in medical and scientific care possible, we can't say it's all bad.
Well, let's just look at the second half. It's not all bad, but let me just have a look at the second bit of the quote that Matt Hancock said in 2017, if we have that graphic. I'm not sure we've got it. I think it might have gone. We have got it. OK, here we go. So this is what he went on to say. Our goal must be to automate work but humanise jobs, allow machines to do the dangerous, boring, repetitive, ensure we humans have the capacity to do the creative, empathetic and interactive. Yeah. Well, that sounds lovely if we're all just going to sit around painting watercolours on our universal basic income. But actually, in reality, how do we do that? And also, Lisa, like you say, some people quite like to work with their hands. Some people quite like to make things.
I come from a mining community. I knew, I went to school I left school at 16, went straight into a factory making tights. In 1984, when I was making tights, I was not making a pair of tights. I was loading a machine up. Yeah. That's what I was. So even then, we were not making anything. But what was happening then is people were connected to the product they were making. And people knew where those factories was, who was doing that. Everybody in the community sort of knew things. Now, where is your tights made? You don't know. You don't even know where you buy them because you click a button. You don't know who's delivering them.
Well, we've offshored most of it, haven't we?
And what has happened is the working class, the international working class, have been disappeared by this technology. And that is not a good thing because if you don't exist, then you don't get rights.
You see, the irony, Ben, of Matt Hancock talking about the fourth industrial revolution as a way to humanise jobs. And yet, all I think technology generally does, it does dehumanise. Like Lisa was saying.
It's antisocial, isn't it?
When I go into the shop, when I go to the till, I don't want to be in a supermarket where I swipe my phone to pay for. I like to have a little chat at the till. Call me old-fashioned, but I think human beings are quite fun.
But some people
quite nice to talk to.
And some people don't for a variety of reasons. And I think, you know, it's a question of having both.
Yeah.
I will refuse to use self-service tills. You know, if I wanted to be a shop assistant, I'd be a shop assistant. I'd rather talk
But
to
you
somebody
may not have the
and
choice.
stand in a
Once
queue.
the fourth industrial revolution is underway, there will be
Well,
no
it is
people.
underway.
It is underway.
Yeah, but also
it
I
is
think
underway,
as
but we
well-
are still in the early stages.
There is a question. I mean, Barbara Heinrich, who was a feminist philosopher, she asked this question quite a number of years ago: who is entitled to interesting work and who is not? And this is what I think this sort of, we are, you know, the creative industries have grown massively, but who are in those interesting work and who is not? Who is in the Amazon warehouses with no choice over anything about their daily life. But then who does the interesting work? And our class system in this country now is as deep and as inherent as it ever was, and it is getting deeper.
Arguably deeper, absolutely. Ben, last question to you. Why do we not hear more people talking about these significant socio-economic, cultural changes? Why aren't we discussing it more? This is one of the first places that I've been allowed to discuss it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we all kind of sleepwalk into this, don't we? Joe made some really positive comments about the fourth industrial revolution. I don't want to be just
And
a
it may
naysayer.
not be all bad.
And it certainly isn't all bad. And, I mean, one thing, you know, if you're a promoter and believer in net zero by 2050, actually, if anything's going to get you there, it's the fourth industrial revolution. We need new technology in order to wean ourselves off traditional forms of fuel. It's critical. And I'm a scientist by background, so I love technological advancement. What we've got to learn to do quite carefully is to balance that with the need to be gregarious social animals, which is inherently human.
Exactly.
And that's the challenge we're facing, I
Yes,
think,
and not
as we
lose
go
our
into
humanity.
this. Yeah.
OK, right, well, you heard it here first. Make sure you get in touch with us, won't you, on Twitter, and let us know what you think.